The wind howled like a banshee, a constant mournful cry that echoed across the desolate Icelandic landscape. Rain lashed against the windows of our rented cabin, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the fragile barrier between us and the storm's fury. Outside, the darkness was absolute, a thick, impenetrable blanket that swallowed the world whole. We, my wife, Sarah, and I, had come to Iceland for adventure, for stark beauty, for the raw, untamed power of nature. We'd envisioned ourselves hiking across glaciers, marveling at waterfalls, and soaking in geothermal springs under the midnight sun. The reality, however, was a far cry from the brochure. It began subtly enough, a missed turn on the ring road, a persistent, unsettling feeling of being watched. The locals we encountered in the tiny, isolated villages seemed withdrawn, their smiles strained, their eyes filled with an ancient, unknowable sadness. They spoke of the Huldufolk, the hidden people, with a reverence that bordered on fear, and of the land itself as something alive, something to be respected, even appeased. Our cabin, nestled in a remote valley a few hours from Vik, was charming in a rustic way, but it was also isolated, disturbingly so. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only sounds at night were the wind, the rain, and the occasional unsettling bleat of a sheep lost in the darkness. The first night, it was just the dreams, vivid, disturbing dreams of icy landscapes, of strange, twisted figures moving in the shadows, of a cold, whispering voice that seemed to call my name. I'd wake up in a sweat, my heart pounding, and Sarah would murmur in her sleep, oblivious. The second night, the dreams intensified. This time, I saw Sarah in my dream, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with terror. She was standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping her hair around her face, and the whispering voice was louder now, closer. I tried to reach her, but my feet were like lead, and she slipped, falling into the abyss. I woke with a strangled cry, my throat raw, my body trembling. Sarah stirred beside me, her brow furrowed. "Nightmare?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "Bad one." I didn't tell her the details. I didn't want to scare her. The next day, the rain was relentless. We were trapped in the cabin, the wind howling like a hungry wolf. Cabin fever began to set in. Sarah, normally so cheerful and adventurous, grew quiet and withdrawn, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I tried to distract her with books and games, but it was no use. The oppressive atmosphere of the place had seeped into her bones. That evening, the power went out. The cabin was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering flames of the fireplace. The wind seemed to redouble its efforts, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundations of the cabin. Sarah was terrified. She clung to me, her body trembling. "I don't like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I don't like this place." "It's just the storm," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It'll pass." But it didn't pass. The storm raged on, and something else began. We heard it first as a scratching sound coming from the walls. It was faint at first, barely audible above the wind, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like something was trying to claw its way into the cabin. Sarah screamed. I grabbed the flashlight, my hand shaking, and swept the beam around the room. The shadows danced and writhed, playing tricks on my eyes. I saw nothing. "What is it?" Sarah cried, her voice hysterical. "What's making that noise?" "I don't know," I said, my voice tight with fear. "Maybe it's just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. The scratching continued, and then we heard another sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. The growl was followed by a series of thumps, as if something heavy was moving around under the cabin. The floorboards vibrated beneath our feet. Sarah began to sob uncontrollably. I pulled her close, trying to comfort her, but I was just as terrified as she was. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't natural. Then, the door creaked open. The wind howled, and the darkness outside seemed to coalesce into a shape, a tall, shadowy figure that stood in the doorway, blocking the light from the fire. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and its face was twisted into a grotesque parody of a human face. Sarah screamed again, a high-pitched, piercing shriek that echoed through the cabin. The figure took a step forward, and I could see its hand, long and skeletal, with sharp black claws. I grabbed Sarah and pulled her behind me, raising the flashlight like a weapon. "Stay back!" I yelled, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, its red eyes fixed on us, its grotesque face twisted into a silent snarl. Then it raised its hand, and I saw that it was holding something. It was a small wooden carving, a crude representation of a human figure. It was old, ancient, and it radiated a sense of cold, malevolent power. As I stared at the carving, I felt a strange compulsion, a powerful urge to take it, to hold it. I fought against it, but it was like trying to resist a powerful current. Sarah saw the look on my face. "No, David," she screamed. "Don't touch it." Her words broke the spell. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. The figure took another step forward, and the carving seemed to pulse with a dark energy. I knew that if I touched that carving, something terrible would happen. I didn't know what, but I knew it would be the end of us. I grabbed Sarah's hand, and we turned and fled, running towards the back of the cabin. The figure followed us, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. We burst through the back door and into the storm. The rain lashed at us, and the wind tried to tear us apart, but we kept running, blindly, desperately, away from the cabin and the horror within. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until our lungs burned and our legs ached. We stumbled and fell, and the darkness seemed to close in around us. I don't know how long we ran or where we went. All I know is that we survived. We made it back to civilization, shaken and terrified, but alive. We never spoke of what happened in the cabin. We tried to forget, to pretend it was just a bad dream, a trick of the mind. But I knew it was real. I knew that we had encountered something ancient, something evil, something that still lurks in the dark heart of Iceland. And I know that I will never forget the feeling of that cold, malevolent presence, the red glow of those eyes, and the scratching, clawing sound that still haunts my nightmares.